Welcome to this new conversation, to this new video here on the Über den Tod reden channel. I'm very happy and grateful and also a bit excited today to be back on making videos because I haven't done any video for quite some time now. And also I'm very grateful that I have a great guest today for an important topic, as I think. So thank you, Daan, for agreeing to this conversation and to talk with me about the topic that we want to share today. Sure. And the topic will be, or the topic that we chose is the pandemic years. It's not really talking about the pandemic, but today we would like to address the losses and the missing farewells and in general the after effects that those past pandemic years had and still have on us individually, of course, personally, and also in a collective. And before we would start, or I would like to start to talk about this topic with you, I would like to introduce you to those viewers that don't know you yet. So Daan van Kampenhout, he's a very well-known workshop leader and author and also shamanic practitioner. In the past decades, he has given countless seminars and trainings in many different countries around the world. And originally, he has learned from traditional teachers of various shamanic cultures and traditions. And by now, he also gives shamanic trainings. And in addition to that, after having met Bert Hellinger in the 90s, so around 25 years ago, and having met his method of family constellations, Daan has developed his own method, unique method called systemic ritual, which combines elements from both worlds, so to speak, from the shamanic world, the shamanic rituals, shamanic traditions, and the family constellations. And this method, the systemic ritual, it has proven very powerful and also beneficial over the past decades, especially for groups in which people and also their ancestors have experienced or share collective trauma and the experience of challenging times. So when we talk about the pandemic, I think we all agree that those have been challenging times for every one of us and also everyone individually and also as a collective. So there have been effects on everyone personally in different ways, I guess. Some have been affected more than others, but in general, we have all kind of suffered from the measures or the whatever different situations. And so it's from my point of view, it's a very special situation in time because it has been a worldwide situation. And maybe the first question would be, because I can imagine that some of our viewers will ask themselves this question, why we even want to talk about it now. Because we experienced this time, this difficult time, but now it's basically over, and most people are happy to not talk about it anymore. I think we all have heard the word Corona, COVID-19, pandemic, and things like that too many times over the past years, and news and discussions and even fights about it. But at the same time, we both agreed that it seems to be important to talk about it and to also invite people to talk about it and to look at it if they feel like it. So maybe that would be the first question. Why do you think right now, even though many people, it's it's this back to normal thing that we are living right now. Why would we look back and even again?
Well, I think we are not back to normal at all. The immediate threat of hospitals overflowing is gone, but still people get COVID. Plus, still there's thousands and thousands of people who suffer from long COVID, some of them in my very close surrounding. So the COVID is not over at all, but I think what we see now in society, and certainly in many individuals, that after the let's say the peak of COVID, the first 2 years, the first 1.5 year, when things were very uncertain, and we got all the vaccination stress in society, etc. That's over. That's true. And now people want to look forward. They don't want to look back to the stress that it caused. But none of that stress has been resolved. Like there are families where some people were pro-vaccinations and some people were against vaccinations, and they didn't know how to resolve that. And now you don't need a COVID pass anymore to go to the cinema or to go to the club to go dancing. So it seems like the problem is resolved, but people don't really have ways to talk about these things. So what we do, we still feel the hurt, the friendships that got lost, or the tensions in the family, and we just look forward now. But there's still a lot of things we need to resolve. As a society, I think we suffered on many, many levels. When you look, my two sisters, they both work in education. Normally at the end of the basic school, the students, they're like 12 years old, they have a musical. For the first time in the history of the school, they cannot do the musical this year because the students cannot concentrate anymore. They only fight. They don't know how to behave socially in a group anymore because they missed that learning while they were getting schooling via Zoom and they couldn't go to school. So COVID is all around us still. It's everywhere in the after effects. And we're only, we're out of the immediate crisis, and now we get the long after effects that we have to deal with. So I think it's healthy to look at where we stand and what we lost, what we gained, what has changed, and to sort of like reorganize our inner resources to deal with where we are now. Yeah.
And what I was thinking about was what you already mentioned, that there were those situations where some people were pro-vaccination and the others were against and things like that. And do you think it will be possible, or in what way could it be possible that we now meet in a new way to talk about what it has done to us? Really, I mean, because everyone, it doesn't really matter on which side you were standing, everyone was affected by it. But
Yes.
do you think it was
on whichever side you were in that conversation, people felt betrayed by the other on both sides, and that's a bit. It's almost like there's no clear enemy. It's not like one party has been declared the right one and one the wrong one. We now see in the political discussions like maybe there should have been more ear from the politicians for what was going on in society, but they listened just to the medics, not to the sociologists. So there is a recognition that there could have been more attention for certain noises, certain, I don't want to say noise, but certain protest voices. At the other hand, people in the conspiracy corner, the extreme region of the anti-vaxxers, they seem to be completely blind for any kind of reason. So on both sides, there have been deafness and blindness for the other perspectives. And you can't just resolve that. I think that is a damage that we will still feel in society for a long time, because people lost a lot of trust in their friends, in their neighbors, in the political system. And it's not like the people who were pro-vaccination were agreeing with everything the government did. It's like there's been a lot of questioning and a lot of damage, I think, all over society. And of course, what will the result of that be? We don't know. But I think what we at least can do is the people who are not at the extreme side of either position and who are interested in how could we come together, that's of course a very good motivation to simply come together and to see if we can open up a little bit for the reality of the other, what their reality was. And it starts simply with listening and being present for each other. And hopefully that some empathy will come back and the closed hearts will be able to open up a little bit more. But it will be a slow and gradual process.
Okay, and from your experience with past trauma, with past collective experiences of those challenging times in many different ways, what do you think now it's still, as you said, it's not really over, so we are not really at the end of it, because there are still cases, COVID and long COVID and so on. And is there anything, because I think now it's a different time. We already have therapies, we already have a knowledge on psychological effects of things like that, which maybe in earlier times wasn't that present yet. So in a way, it was only possible to look back much later on what the effects were. Yeah. So nowadays, we actually can look at that. But do you think it's, I
think there are certain, of course, individually, it's always very different, right? Some people, after a traumatic situation, it's very healthy to immediately start working with it so that you get out of the dissociation maybe, or you start to work with new resources. So on the individual level, some people absolutely be ready to start working and looking and really digesting. But when you look at collectives, they are not that fast. And like what we see now in society, that COVID is hardly in the news anymore. It's sort of like completely faded out and people don't like to talk about it. It's really a collective trauma response. Like these years were hard. It's sort of like we're out of the danger zone. Let's look forward and not look back. And in a way, that's a healthy thing. But it's also a bit crazy. Like there in the Netherlands, there was a parliamentary investigation group going to look at how the government dealt with COVID. And they just cancelled it. They said, we're not going to do it. And some vague, there's other things are more important now. But it simply means that collective isn't really that interested at this moment to digest and look back. Mm. And some things really take a long time. Like if you look at, for example, the Spanish Civil War, where it was the communists and the fascists, and it also went through families, through villages, on all levels of society. There was this strong division. To a certain extent, it's still almost impossible to have that discussion in Spanish society. Because on both sides, people died. And on both sides, people were very traumatized by the other side. And of course, there it was literally with murder and war. In COVID, some people used that language too, like vaccinations were murder. Mm. Okay, well, that's a very, very strong language. Is that true or not? But it's the reality of the people who were in that state of thinking. So that's not something that you can resolve very easily. But for sure, for people who are interested to look at it, and also, especially, I think, collectively, you will need some rituals. For example, there might be like a wall somewhere where you can put up a little heart or a name of people who died of COVID. These are collective rituals that are healthy and good for society. But on the individual level, people might really want to look with much more precision. And then it would be good if we have these places where that can happen. And of course, that's why we wanted to do this one day, where people can look at like, what did I lose? And you always have to start with the individual story. Whenever I work with these collective themes in different countries and cultures, I never start with an abstract work. I never do an abstract work. It always comes through the individual questions and the individual situation of the participants. And from there, we start looking at what's been going on. So we always start very, very close and personal, and then see how can we involve other people in the ritual, in the work that we do. I think then we can do quite a lot for the people who want to look, who want to grieve for that what they could not grieve for. My own father died in the first COVID wave, and at that time nobody was allowed at the burial, and even the medical staff, they would look like Martians, like in these space suits, and that's a horrible way to die. How to process that, to have been, how many families went through that? You cannot even go to the burial, only a few people can go, and the burial is via Zoom. Whoever had a Zoom burial before Corona, there's a lot of stuff that we have gone through that I think still needs to be received by others, just with empathic eyes. And so there's work to do.
Yeah, that's something that I, of course, witnessed a lot during those years, because I'm working as a mortician, and here in our funeral home, we have seen many people in different situations where people of their family or friends died, and they couldn't even be in the hospital, or before that they couldn't visit them in their home and things like that. So sometimes they haven't seen them in weeks, and then suddenly they get the information that they died. And of course, if someone was COVID positive, it was even worse. But still, it's not only. It's basically
everything was disrupted, of course. Yeah. Sometimes when I look at my diary notes, it's only now I say like, oh my God, Jesus, that was so much. But of course, then we went through it. You have to keep breathing and you have to do your thing. But even now, when I look back, sometimes I'm amazed at the intensity of what was happening. And I couldn't yet feel it then on the same level as now with some distance, that it lands in a different place to look back at these things.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is healthy, I think. It's a process of digestion and integrating, and there's work to do for sure, on personal levels, on the levels between friends, families, villages, neighbors,
and also on a professional level, I would call it, like I said, it was as in my work, and that was also the case for doctors and nursing staff, and I don't know, people like that who had to, for example, who had to tell a father that he is not allowed to visit his dying son, or things like that, And I think that's also something that, as you said, while doing it, you don't have other options most of the time.
A friend of mine in Brighton, he set up, at the beginning of COVID, he set up a helpline for medical staff and nurses, just to talk. It wasn't made available through the official channels, but some volunteers, some former nurses set up this system. Yeah, the amount of material people had to process, it's like, especially the hospitals, that first half year, and then again the peak in winter, it was a war zone. I think it's hard to imagine. But I think, the grief is on some level, it can also be a uniting factor. For example, what I find personally very painful is that in both, of course, in the end, it was a lot about the vaccination, yes or no, and the policies around that. And then it was like vaccination is good or vaccination is bad. And it isn't always, it has not always been that simple. For example, a friend of mine, after the vaccinations, she got horrible menstruation pain that she never had before. And then every now and then you see in the newspaper, yeah, there seems to be some connection between increased menstruation cramps and stuff and vaccination. It's also, you know, the people who vaccinated, the people who didn't vaccinate, there was so much gray there on both sides. And yeah, it's personally, as far as people find it relevant, I'm still am a caretaker of my mother in her 90s. So I chose for the vaccinations. It was not a question for me because I felt it was a responsible thing to do. And but I try to keep my ear open for those who wanted to share, you know, not who want to scream at me, not from the pro and not from the con side, but if people want to share and want to make contact. It's been very interesting to also on Facebook not like anything pro or against. So to stay in a neutral zone was almost impossible, but at least to try. That was challenging too. I mean, there's been no easy place for nobody in this pandemic. And some people, of course, suffered more than others, for sure. Some people gained a lot. There were opportunities suddenly there that brought their life to a new, happier place. That also happened. But even then, they also had to pay price in other aspects of their lives. So it's very fascinating, very fascinating.
Yeah, and the world is different than before. I mean, when I think back to 2019, it seems that now life is back to normal most of the time, but still it's a different world. And I think that's also a very interesting and huge aspect of it, that it really affected the whole world. I mean, all of us as humanity, not just some countries or some areas.
Yes, absolutely. And sort of like the hope in the beginning that, oh, we have to stand still and we can make a green start, a green restart. Well, that has been an illusion, very clearly. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the climate crisis is more in our face than ever. Yeah, it's there's a lot of challenge in that sense. But it's, you know, it's maybe you said like in old times, people did not have therapy. They did not have certain psychological tools that we have now, but people did have an understanding of ritual and how to, at least in some cultures, there was a clear understanding that after having suffered something together, you have to go through ritual to come literally out the other end to make a restart. So there has always been, of course, knowledge in human communities how to deal with collective trauma. And so there is things we can still profit from the things how our ancestors did it, and how I would say pre-psychological methods of ritual and understanding. They're also still here, passed on by teachers, and so there are certainly things we can do individually and also collectively to find a stronger ground under our feet and to look to the future, not to look away from the past, but to look grounded in the past to the future with more strength. So
that's a good good that you share that. And I think it's it would be interesting maybe for the ones who view this and who feel that, okay, I can totally connect to that, and I need something. I need some sort of ritual or some, just something. Maybe there's just the feeling that something is missing so far. So
I did when it's now a year ago. So springtime 2022, I did 3 seminars with the theme of Corona in different countries, where I specifically, the organizers invited people to come and share their stories about Corona, regardless what their position was, regardless what their personal experience was in the Corona time, but to come together in the spirit of we want to reunite. And the theme was, or the focus was, that everybody has lost friends, family, not just through death, but also through this fighting in these different positions. And that the seminars were an invitation to come and share and to see if some kind of reconnecting would be possible. So I did it while we were still a little bit in it. So when the fights and the wounds were still very raw, and still there was still a possibility of maybe lockdown, or still here and there was still, you needed to show your vaccination proof and stuff. And that was it was very strong to do that together. But then we were still in it. But it was very nice then to already start thinking about methods and how can we do rituals in which we really have the opportunity to reconnect, or in which we have the opportunity to recognize that our normal resources have been shaken up because of our experiences, and that we need other or stronger roots to deal with what we had to deal with. And then the ancestor field, of course, is a very rich resource, because our ancestors, they all went through collective trauma, like wars or hunger or migration because of natural disaster or because of political persecutions. So our ancestor fields are full of humans who went through collective trauma, and some of them, we might say, got lost or died or ended up on the wrong side. Others got stronger and found resources and found healing. And so when we do in systemic ritual, when we work with the Corona stuff, we do include the ancestors, both those who still need healing from collective trauma and those who can give healing and give strength because they have transformed some of the trauma into strength again. And that in itself is very powerful, to be with a group of people and to look at the ancestors and to realize, like, okay, we went through this. Well, we still had food here in the Western world, at least. Very few people, no, some people lost their jobs, some people lost their house. There's definitely more homeless people on the streets now than before in the cities where I go. But still, we came out relatively good compared to what happened in older times with war and with hunger. So when we connect to our ancestors and also get a sense like, aha, for us it may have been new, but this is actually the history of mankind, these collective traumas. So that in itself can be a grounding and strengthening experience when we connect to the ancestors in a constructive way, and and recognize the power that they develop to deal with these things generation after generation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was actually, that's how we met, or at least I got to know you at a seminar in Munich last year, where Corona was also part of the topics.
Yes, you were in one of those three.
And so what I found it very peaceful to look at it in this way, in this more broad way, and to get a little bit of distance from being too close and closely involved and only seeing, well, I am suffering or I have this and that, but to get this more broader view and to get the possibility to maybe go into a direction of acknowledging that, yeah, this is actually all part of human life, human being.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
That was
yes. You don't want to diminish your experience in any way. At the same time, by disidentifying a little bit of it, and that's not dissociation, but when you can see your personal experience in the framework of something larger, that is a collective human experience, something already gets lighter because you're not carrying it on your own or with only the friends who are on your side. It's something like, this is a human experience that occurs in most generations at least once, historically, sometimes more often. And what did the ancestors, what is the strength they developed to carry this, and how can we connect? And what did we develop and we can offer those ancestors who are still suffering, maybe.
Mm.
So it's a two-way thing, and that in itself, I think, is
It's very
when it's facilitated. I would say when you know the way to connect exactly there where you want to connect, then that's definitely a healing movement.
Mm. So maybe, at least for me, that would be the most important thing, maybe also from our talk today, that's at least something I experience, in that sometimes I think there has to be a quick solution, because I can see, I don't know, there's a trauma, so we can have some method and we can release the trauma and we can find new ways or something like that. So I know that sometimes I tend to, it's more the longing for something like that, the longing for having an end to the fightings, and a longing for people to find ways of integrating what they have experienced, also, of course, for myself, and to go this way, so to speak, to go back to peace and, I don't know, harmony, or what would be.
It's tricky, huh? Because when you want that too fast, then you're actually fighting the trauma. Like, you have to go. It doesn't work that way. Of course, we all know. And unfortunately, a lot of the contemporary spirituality puts a lot of emphasis on, like, you are responsible for your happiness and you can change your world. And to a certain extent, that's not untrue. But there are a lot of larger factors, and the world is always stronger than you are. So there's also something grounding in just looking at the knowledge that some things take time. And when you get into peace with that, then strength comes back. It's a little bit of a paradox. It's like, but it's yeah. We want to be free of pain. That's normal, and step by step.
And that's really why I invited you and was very happy that you agreed to come for the seminar, because of this view on that. Yeah, because it takes away this, again, fighting against trauma, or fighting against that what we don't want to have. And it opens up a new space, I think. Yeah.
Yes, and I think the point is more like, how can we create, where can we find the kind eyes in this world and in the other world that can look at us with our trauma so that we feel supported? And how can we make our arms stronger to hold it? There are ways. And it's a slow process, and it's good to do it together. Some things you do alone, some things you have to do together, for sure.
So, for the end of our conversation, maybe the last question: what could people do when they? I mean, of course, they can come to join the seminar, but if they don't want to, or can't come, what can they do on their own, on themselves, with themselves, like inviting some friends? And is there any impulse, any idea that you could give them just for themselves?
I find that hard to say, because it depends so much, like, where are you, where were you, what was your experience, right? Some people feel very violated by the choices of others. Other people feel very betrayed by the choices of others, either like friends or family or the government. It's very, when the pain is still strong and the wound is still open, it's not appropriate for me to give a general advice like, do this or do that. It's like, self-care is important. Like, find your own ground, find your own, find the roots that help you to stand. And where there is somebody who can listen, you can speak a little bit. But it's not really appropriate to say general things for people in trauma. It's too easy. So I hope that, I would say, out of respect for the intensity of what we all did, I find it very hard to say general things. And that's also why also when people want to come to the seminar, they will get an invitation to write me before with some story or something they would like to bring to my attention of what happened to them in the Corona time. And from those letters, I will distill some themes and create some rituals that we can do together. It's always, for me, it always starts with a personal story and me receiving that personal story, and then close my eyes, take my rattle or drum to pray for support for that person, for the system they're part of, to pray for support for me as a facilitator. What can I do in this situation? To pray for the people who will be present when we do the work, and to ask what is a ritual, what is an exercise we can do that will support not only this client, this individual, but the whole circle that's part of it. So I say very few things in general. It always starts with a very precise personal situation. And from there, we carefully open up the package of the situation and the memory and the trauma. And we see if we can bring a little bit color, a little bit of fresh breath, a little bit of beauty in there. And small steps.
Yeah, so maybe that's something important, I think, to, in a first step, even realize that this might be a personal trauma, the experience, and that, as you said, it needs very slow and step-by-step care, and very
and trauma a lot of trauma heals by itself. It's like the word trauma doesn't mean that you need professional help always, like a wound that you have, you scratch your arm, it will heal by itself. A lot of trauma will heal by itself. And so in that sense, take your time, surround yourself with music that you like, surround yourself with colors that are beautiful, make sure you have a walk in nature when there's a beautiful sunset. All these things, they regulate our nervous system. And that's always step one, to sort of like bring the agitation out of the nervous system. And from there, ideas will come up, like, oh, maybe I should write my sister. We ended in a really bad fight. But when I calm down, I feel I just want to express my regret. But that's your idea that comes up when you are in a calmer state. I like to encourage people to find their own solutions, but I can help them to reach a state in which there's more stability. And hopefully, we will see what we can do on this day with the people who want to do the work.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much for your time and for your insights. And I don't know, I feel it's a huge topic for such a short time. So talk a long time about it. But I hope that for the ones who saw this video, the conversation, that there's something for them that they can take and maybe go on with.
It is a huge topic, and it will concern us for many years to come in many different ways. And thank you for the invitation and for the interview for today.